Hey guys, in this video we'll do a deep dive comparison between all the main elite melee units Space Marines have and see which one is the deadliest in combat, and is all that talk about the Victrix Honour Guard true? There's a lot of math in this video, so if you're into that sort of thing, please stay tuned. It took me like a day to make this one, so without further ado, let's dive right in. Here's how we're gonna structure this. We're gonna compare the Victrix Guard against a particular unique melee unit, which is a lot like the Victrix Guard themselves. I'm not going to compare them against the Blade Guard because those are generic, and I wanted to look at the specifically unique datasheet units like the Victrix Guard for the Ultramarines, because essentially they are the same as the Sword Brethren or the Inner Circle Companions. So first is the comparison between them and the Sword Brethren, and we're focusing on the melee damage specifically. I specifically stayed away from discussing the tactical applicability of that damage as much as possible, because otherwise that would not be a video, that would be a whole lecture, like a book I could write about all of that stuff. There's so many details to go into, especially considering all the detachment possibilities. There's just like a million things. So I wanted to focus on one specific aspect, and then from that you can make your own conclusion. But we're going to take the cost into account as a very easy to compare metric. So the Victrix Honour Guard are 210 points for 6. 10 Sword Brethren are 235 points. So cheaper point per model, but obviously different stat lines. And talking about that, main melee profile for the Victrix Guard is Strength 5, AP 2, Damage 2, with hitting on 2s, of course, because they are amazing Ultramarine guys. The main melee profile for the Sword Brethren is the same Strength 5, AP 2, Damage 2, which seems to be the standard kind of for the Space Marine wielding a power sword, but with only 3 attacks and still hitting on 2s with lethal hits, which that is going to come in handy later in some of our comparisons. Victrix can have a chapter champion with them, which is going to have the same profile but strength. Yeah, same profile, same strength, but twin linked and 6 attacks with precision. Obviously, precision is not going to be accounted in this damage comparison because we're not going to talk about who we are applying the damage to, only how much damage is being applied. Sword Brethren can have twin lightning claws and thunderhammer on 2 of the guys, but honestly, those are not an actual upgrade in a lot of cases, unlike the 6 attacks on the chapter champion, which is just a better profile. The power mastercrafted power sword versus twin lightning claws is more of a which target you are attacking situation, because the twin lightning claws are obviously damage 1. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind here. That's why for calculations I ran just the power swords on all the Sword Brethren, and I did run obviously the chapter champion for the Victrix Honour Guard, though if you're running multiple squads you're not going to be able to have the chapter champion in multiple units. Only one of them is going to have it. But I decided to give the Victrix as much of a fighting chance as possible, and yeah, they did fight very well. So first of all, we're going to do a raw comparison. We're going to do 2 different comparisons. One is going to be a raw one where we don't have any buffs and the units at all, like nothing. This is just pure out of the box, no detachment, no army rule, nothing. Just how well they fight in a vacuum. And the second one is what I called max practical buff comparison. What I mean by that is we're not going to be saying that this is the maximum damage they can physically possibly get in a best case scenario, but this is as close to it as possible by still being a practical situation. So there are probably a few ways to get like an extra buff from something else to be added on top of that in some certain situations, but this is something that you can access without jumping through what I would consider too many hoops. This is what you can actually reasonably expect to field on the tabletop, and when you want to buff a squad to its ultimately like maximum potential in a practical example, this is what you would get. So that's what I mean by max practical buff comparison. The same is going to be for the unit that we're comparing the Victrix to. Also important note, all of these results are without the leader's damage, because we're not comparing how well does the Helbrecht fight versus how well Calgar fights. We're comparing how well the Sword Brethren fight versus the Honour Guard, and that's a very different story. So in all of these, whenever I was counting the leaders, I was counting only the buff that they provide, not the the attacks themselves, which obviously some leaders are going to be more efficient than the others, but again, that's not the comparison that we are trying to make here. So all of this out of the way, now we can actually look at the numbers. So raw comparison first. I was comparing against 3 different unit types. That's a toughness 10, 12 wound, 3+ save tank, which is my main thing that I always like to see if a unit can kill or not. And it's a very reliable threshold to actually run comparisons against. Next is an elite infantry model, which is a Terminator, with so toughness 5, 3 wounds, 2+ save, 4 up invulnerable save, and the last one is an intercessor, so toughness 4, 2 wounds, and 3+ save. And if you have not seen these comparisons before, you might wonder what does the slash mean in this case. So the number to the left of the slash is the average damage. The number to the right of the slash is 80% confidence. So what is the number of wounds you can expect almost guaranteed to make to that target? So versus a tank, the Victrix Honour Guard, or I'm going to call them Honour Guard just because that's too long, do 6.6 wounds and 80% confidence damage is 4 wounds. The Sword Brethren will do 10 wounds and 6 with 80% confidence. So quite a bit more than the Victrix Guard. Against the Terminators, they will do 14.2 damage or 10, and the Sword Brethren will do 12.5 and 8. So less than the Victrix Guard, and well, I don't want to say a lot less, but significantly so to be noticeable. And against the Intercessors, it will be 24.5 on average and 20 wounds with 80% confidence. So they're very, very good at killing those, and 20 wounds and 16 wounds for the Sword Brethren. So as we go down the toughness and kind of the how thick the enemy unit is, the more the volume of attacks that the Victrix Guard have starts to show up. Now let's see the max practical buff comparison. In this case, we have them both running as Gladius because that's what you are most likely to encounter, A, and B, honestly, I think this is the best detachments for the Black Templars. With my all respect to the Black Templars Codex, Gladius just blows all the Black Templars detachments out of the water, unfortunately. And it has some really, really good buffs for us to use for both the Guard and the Sword Brethren. Here are the buffs that I've had for the VHG. They had the +1 to wound from Oath, they had rerolls to hit from Oath, we had +1 AP from Honor the Chapter, or you could have had the lens from that as well, doesn't really matter. They have +1 attack and +1 strength from their once per game use of the banner. So this is, in this case, we are considering like how much damage they can do on the best go turn that they can have. The Sword Brethren, on the other hand, they have +1 attack, +1 strength from Helbrecht, who's leading them, +1 to wound from their vow, rerolls to hit from Castellan, and +1 AP from Honor the Chapter. Obviously, if you are attacking the Intercessors, the +1 to wound from the Vow will not work, so you will be getting the +1 to wound from Lens. So let's look at those numbers. Against toughness 10, 12 wound, 3+ save tank, the Victrix Guard will do 22.5 or 18 wounds with 80% confidence. Sword Brethren will do 37 wounds on average and 32 with 80% confidence. So the difference is very dramatic. It is almost double for the 80% confidence, and that is a really good example. And again, this is not including the leader. So this is, Helbrecht is not fighting. Imagine he's fighting against something else. And obviously the leaders of the Victrix Guard who might be there, they are not fighting against the same thing either. Now, going down the toughness, we'll see a similar story that the Victrix Guard start doing pretty well. However, they still do worse than the Sword Brethren, so they do 25.5 or 20 wounds to the Terminators, and the Sword Brethren will do 31.1 and 26 on the other hand. Against Intercessors, it will be crazy 51.5 or 46 with 80% confidence. On the Victrix Guard, this is freaking crazy. It's like what is this? It's like 2 10-man squads and change killed. And the Sword Brethren will do 51.9 and 46 as well. So it's essentially the same. The 0.4 difference in the average damage is pretty much not really, it's more of a statistical anomaly rather than a real difference, but technically they did nudge ahead just slightly here. So overall, here's the summary. The Sword Brethren are deadlier as a 10-man squad, and it's to be expected, honestly, because it's a 10 model unit, which is just a bit more expensive than the Victrix Guard, but obviously from the tactical standpoint, it takes a lot more space on the board. Sword Brethren need a bigger transport. They cannot fit inside an impulsor. They're harder to hide. So it's to be expected that they will do more damage, and therefore you have to pay a higher cost to get them to their destination. And Victrix Guard a higher threat density, so you'll get to fit more of that damage onto the area on the board or inside a transport. But the Sword Brethren lose less of their potential per model killed. So if you lose 2 Sword Brethren models, it's not going to have the same effect as losing 2 Victrix Guard from the 6-man unit. This one is a clear winner for the Sword Brethren, which makes me happy because not everything should be an Ultramarines victory. You can clearly see that the Victrix Guard have a very high points efficiency, which makes me think that they will probably get a bit of a points hike at some point. Though, I think that the hike that they're gonna get should not be as high as some of the more vocal people in the audience of Warhammer 40k community might think. They are not as big of a threat as some people imagine. You just need to know how to deal with them, and like maybe running 3 squads of 6 of these is a bit oppressive, but again, I don't think this is a be-all and-all kind of a situation with the Victrix Guard, even though they're definitely a good unit. I know that not everyone watching this knows, but vf.miniatures isn't just a YouTube channel, it's also a full-time painting studio. Every single army you've seen on the channel we can easily replicate for you. If you've been staring at your pile of shame for too long, let's fix that together. Get a free no-obligation quote at the link below, even just to see what your army could become. I would be proud to bring it to life for you. Next is the Victrix Guard versus the Headtakers. This one is a very interesting one. First of all, I really love the Headtakers unit. It's really cool. And they only cost 170 points. They're really, really cheap. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on their efficiency because you will see why. The Headtakers have an option to take a Storm Shield, but I don't think you should do that. For the purposes of this test, we're using the optimal melee profile. And that's, to be honest, what you want to be running in most cases anyways, because these guys, if someone is going to try to kill them, they're going to die anyways, but the goal is not to allow the opponent to get to them before you hit something that you really want to hit, with 6 attacks at strength 5, AP 2, damage 2. And you heard me right, it's 6 attacks per guy. And that's crazy. You're gonna see how crazy just in a second here. They are hitting on 3s though, so keep that in mind. They will need Oath to reach their full potential because they lose more of those opportunities when they are trying to hit without rerolls compared to the Guard. First, the raw comparison. Against a tank, the Guard will do 6.6 or 4 wounds, and the Headtakers will do 5.3 and 2 wounds. So very, very low damage. Like this comparison, this math here, it shows you why you need and you must have dedicated anti-tank solutions in your army, because the game now, with how the toughness scale is designed to make you fail if you hope that your supposedly good melee unit, and like, look at this is a 6-man squad of Headtakers on the charge, which doesn't do anything for them in this case, if you're not running any buffs. So if they just charge raw a tank, they will do, with 80% confidence, 2 wounds to it, which equals to pretty much nothing. And I don't think this is correct. I think that the melee, the fight phase should be redone, honestly, completely redone in 11th edition. I think that's just not very fun. And this is not how the 6-man squad of super killy berserk Space Marines should feel against something like a Gladiator Lancer. Yeah. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I hope you agree. Against Terminators, the situation starts to kind of ramp up to some normal levels. The Honor Guard will do 14.2 and 10, and the Headtakers will do 12 and 8. So that is definitely a Victrix Guard victory here. And against Intercessors, it will be 24.5 and 20 for the Guard, and 21.4 and 16 for the Headtakers. So again, very good numbers for both, but the Victrix Guard are winning here. However, let's look at the maximum practical buff comparison. The Guard will still get their same spiel, the same everything that they got last time. The Headtakers will get rerolls from Oath to hit. They get sustain hits 1 from the Wolf Guard battle leader that leads them. The +1 to wound and +1 AP will come from Honor the Chapter and Assault Doctrine, and they will have their Devastating Wounds ability, which I did calculate separately. It's without the Devastating Wounds, so you can see how they will perform against not marked targets. So if you don't know, the Headtakers, they get to select a unit at the start of the battle, the one that they're going to have precision and Devastating Wounds against. And I wanted us to have a clear comparison both with that ability applied, or if you're fighting, say, against something that you did not select in the beginning of the game. The second pair of numbers for the Headtakers is going to be without the Devastating Wounds. So let's look. Results without the leaders. Against Toughness 10 tank, the Honor Guard will do the same 22.5 or 18 wounds. The Headtakers will do 24.4 or 20 wounds. So clear victory for them. And without the Devastating Wounds, it's going to be 22.3 and 18. So essentially exactly the same as the Victrix Guard. Anything less than like half of a wound, I would consider in this case a statistical anomaly. It's not a real difference that we can count. Against Terminators, the Victrix Honour Guard will do 25.5 and 20 wounds, and the Headtakers will do 33.4 or 28 wounds. So a massive victory versus the Victrix Guard. And without the Devastating Wounds, it's still a victory, 26.6 and 22 wounds against the Terminators. And against the Intercessors, finally, it's the same 51.5 and 46 for the Guard, and 57.8 and 52 wounds for the Headtakers. Or without the Devastating Wounds, it's going to be 55.6 and 50, so essentially the same result. So a clear victory for them. Not a massive difference, but it is a significant one. Also keep in mind that the Honor Guard, in every single one of these, they are fighting with the +1 strength and +1 from their banner, so the maximum output they're going to have, and they cannot repeat the same turn after turn because the banner is once per game. Overall, damage-wise, the Headtakers are deadlier with buffs and less deadly without them, whilst being obviously significantly cheaper for the same model count. So it's a 6-man squad that you're going to pay only 170 points for. It's very likely you're going to buy the Wolves, but I decided to give you the cost without them because obviously if you're just adding the Wolves to the squad, the Wolves are not fighting with you. It's essentially like buying a scoring choice alone as a package deal, so they're not really meant to be part of this comparison. Of course, keep in mind the Guard will probably go up in points further alone in the game, whilst same isn't true for the Headtakers. I'm pretty sure those are going to stay the same, and they are faster. They're 7-inch move versus the 6-inch move on the Victrix Guard. Obviously, they don't have the Blood Surge ability and the all the defensive stat lines that really help the Guard to survive longer, but they are also much cheaper, and they're going to be even cheaper still after the Guard are increased in their cost, which I am like 99% sure is going to happen either in the next Mini-Turn Field Manual or the very next after that one. And their Headhunter's ability actually doesn't impact the situation that much, which is interesting. I found that to be curious. Next is the Victrix Guard versus Inner Circle Companions. I was looking forward to that one because the ICC are like one of the favorite units of Space Marines in the game for me. I loved the idea of these Dark Angels Knights ever since I read the Dark Angels books about them like storming the castle and all the like the chaplain two brothers that have been inducted into the Adeptus Astartes and all that stuff. That was like really interesting for me, so I wanted to see how these models are gonna perform. The cost difference is still quite significant. They are 10 points more expensive than the Headtakers, but they're still 30 points cheaper than the Victrix Honour Guard, and they should be because they are like a class lower in terms of their basic stat lines than the Victrix Guard. The ICC are equipped with the Carbonite Greatswords with 2 profiles, and them having 2 profiles is a big advantage compared to the Guard, because if you're fighting against 1 wound models, those profiles are amazing. The second one, the sweep. This one is 4 attacks at 622, so higher strength than the Victrix Guard in their base stat line, and 5 attacks at strength 6 AP2 damage 1 with sustain 2. So if you want the sweep, you get an extra attack, and you also get a sustain 2, which can spike like crazy, especially if you have Oath up. They would get +1 to hit against character units, but for the purposes of this test, we're gonna ignore this buff completely, because obviously we don't know if a particular vehicle that you're going to fight against has a character keyword, which sometimes can happen, or your Terminator squad has a leader, etc., etc. So yeah, we're going to just count it without this buff, which is a bonus for the ICC. In case you're going to be actually running them in games and then get to use this rule. Against the tank, the Honor Guard will do the same 6.6 and 4. The ICC will do 10.7 and 8. So again, we see this kind of trend where the higher strength and lethal hits, they really do help against the higher toughness things, because wounding on 6s is no fun, and that's where the strength 5 of the Victrix Guard power weapons really sucks. Against Terminators, the Victrix Guard will do 14.2 and 10. The ICC will do 12.0 and 8 wounds with 80% confidence. So though they're higher strength, so they're wounding the Terminators on 3s with lethal hits, the lack of volume, the lower volume, not lack of, but lower volume than the 5 attacks that the Guard have, is really showing up here. And of course, lastly, the Intercessors, and here it's pretty obvious. The 24.5 and 20 wounds for the Guard, and 16.0 and 12 wounds for the ICC. So the lack of volume really shows when you're starting to attack those perfect sweet spot targets like toughness 4, 3+ save, 2 wounds that Victrix really like to fight against. The ICC are still good against them, but obviously not as good as compared to like a tank, for example. And now for the max practical buff comparison. So the Gladius, the Victrix Guard get +1 to wound rerolls to hit, all this stuff that they got last time. The ICC will get rerolls to hit from Oath, sustained 1 from Azrael, which in my opinion is the best character to lead them, +1 to wound and +1 AP from Honor the Chapter. Results without leaders. So against the tank, the Victrix Guard will do 22.5 and 18 wounds. The ICC will do 26.7 and 22 wounds, so better than the Victrix Guard. Against Terminators, the Victrix Guard will do 25.5 and 20. The ICC will do 23.1 and 18. So significantly, but not a lot more, but obviously noticeable. And against the Intercessors, the victory is clearly on the Victrix Guard, because 51.5 is much better than 38.6. So one thing to note here is that if we added an extra layer of comparison, which would be something like a 1 wound 4+ save model, say Eldari Aspect Warriors or the actual guard, the guardsman, the ICC will be a clear winner, because even though the base volume of the Victrix Guard is higher, the sustain hits too and matching of the quantity of the attacks with 5 attacks on the ICC will make a big difference, because the 2 wounds is not going to matter, the 2 damage, is not going to matter on the Victrix Guard, but the sustain hits 2 and the same AP 2 is going to matter. So if you fight against Horde units, the ICC will be much, much better than the Victrix Guard. They're also better against tougher targets, so tanks, both with buffs and without buffs, where the Victrix shine is against the medium toughness, kind of average elite infantry and normal infantry styled units. So I think it's a great result for the ICC, considering they are 30 points cheaper than the still not nerfed Victrix Guard, which again they will probably get a points hike. Last but definitely not least are the Sanguinary Guard. So this unit is more expensive than the Victrix Guard. They are 260 for a 6-man squad, but of course they are quite a different beast, because they are a jump pack fly infantry unit, which will pay a premium for being that fast, and for them being able to deliver themselves into the fray and also go over enemy screens is a very big bonus, something that the Victrix Guard don't have. I mean, Blood Surge is nice, but come back to that at the very end of the video. So let's do the stat lines of the Sanguinary Guard. They have 2 weapon options: the spears with 4 attacks at 622 and lance, or swords with the same 4 attacks at 632, hitting on 2s but without the lance, and they both are hitting into us actually. For the purposes of this test, we will be running the swords as the lance is accessible elsewhere, and it's important for our max buff comparison, though honestly I am not sure that the lance is actually the correct option if you're planning to run these and sometimes not have the buffs. I'm kind of starting to like the lances. A comparison for the swords is against the tank, the Victrix Guard will do the same as always. The Sanguinary Guard will do 11.1 or 8, so better than the Victrix Guard. Against Terminators, the Victrix Guard will do 14.2 and 10. The Sanguinary Guard will do 13.3 and 10. So the same 80% confidence damage, and the almost same damage for the average. Against Intercessors, it will be 24.5 and 20, and 22.2 and 18. So close to, but still quite a bit lower than the Guard. Now the max practical buff comparison. Here I had to do two separate tables because the Liberator Assault group kind of changes the numbers quite a lot. So again, the first number you're going to see is for the Gladius. The second number you're going to see is for Lag, where we get extra attack and extra 2 strength on the charge. So obviously Lag is going to be higher absolute damage than Gladius. Gladius is better tactically in a lot of cases, but I wanted you to know like the maximum damage potential. Same buffs as always for the Victrix Guard. The Sanguinary Guard will get rerolls to hit from Oath. They're going to have +1/2 strength from the Jump Back Captain. They're going to have Lance and a +1 AP from the Honor the Chapter. In Liberator Assault group, they will get Lance and Lethals, both. So we're activating the whole Red Rampage together. We get +2 strength in the charge, +1 attack from the detachment, both of them, and +1 strength for the captain as well. Again, results without the leaders. Against a tank, the Victrix Guard will do 22.5 and 18, as always. A Sanguinary Guard will do 23.3 and 20, so higher than the Victrix Guard, even without Liberator Assault group. With the Liberator Assault group, they will do 29.2 and 24, so significantly higher. Against Terminators, the Victrix Guard will do 25.5 and 20. The Sanguinary will do 19.5 and 16, and 25.5 and 20. So the Liberator Assault group Sanguinary Guard do exactly the same amount of damage on the charge as the Victrix Guard do on their go turn with the banner, which is interesting. And I guess it's not really a big issue. It's probably just the case where the Victrix Guard should be around maybe 220 to 30 points mark, and that will make more sense for this kind of result for them. Against Intercessors, it will be 51.5 and 46 as before, and 38.9 and 36 for the Sangard, and 42.1 and 38 for them in Liberator Assault group. So even with all the buffs, the crazy results the Victrix Guard against the Intercessor type target cannot be matched, even by Sanguinary Guard on the charge with Liberator Assault group and all the buffs in the world. They are better against the tougher targets, but against like this perfect thing that the Victrix are good against on their go turn, they still can't match that. Only the Sword Brethren and the Headtakers could. Overall, damage-wise, the Sanguinary Guard have a similar situation to the ICC, with Liberator Assault group evening things out a bit versus the Victrix Guard. Against higher model count units, they perform worse, where the volume of attacks is the main factor. But against higher toughness things, like beefier stuff, that is, in my opinion, harder to kill in those cases, the Sanguinary Guard will do better. With or without the buffs, mind you. What is going to be worse against Terminators without buffs? Same in Liberator Assault group, and worse versus Intercessors. But keep in mind, again, this is with the once per game banner that the Victrix Guard get for free. Now here is my summary and kind of my opinion about this situation. So I think that Victrix Guard need to be a bit more expensive. I think that they are not as oppressive as some people think. They die really easily to high AP anti-elite infantry shooting that is quite readily available in a lot of good armies. And if you just manage to, if you're playing against the best option for the Victrix Guard, which by the way I did a video about that, so if you want to check it out, about the top 3 combos with them, the best one in my opinion is the old Sicarius Captain model, where you get the reactive move, the 6-inch reactive move for free, and Scout both. So if you play against that, it's a bit harder, but it's still very manageable, because if if the Victrix Guard are in the midst, like somewhere in the center of the board, somewhere close to you, yes, they will probably get to connect against some, like one thing, but then you just do the typical dance of playing against a reactive move. So your goal is to make sure that they don't get the reactive move, and therefore they cannot get into combat with your stuff until the very end of your shooting, where you want to potentially shoot them with something that is really good, and then you can just charge them to finish them off, because they don't get to fight on death if they're playing Blades of Ultramar. They don't have fights first, and they can't have fights first. So I don't think they are as horribly unkillable or something like that as a lot of people think, and they will probably be overcorrected by GW, because honestly, when I played them, I did not feel like they are that amazing or something that is just so oppressive that you can't deal with it. A lot of it, I think, is psychology. Yes, if you put 3 of them on the table, they are going to be a bit too efficient, because they are a bit too efficient for their points. They should be 220, 230 maybe, but I don't think that they need to be nerfed into the ground like some other things that existed in 10th edition and editions before that. They just need a bit of a correction, and meta just needs to adapt to playing against them, which I'm sure is going to happen. I think the larger problem is actually the intercodex balance for Space Marines, where the Ultramarines feel like they get all the toys and they don't pay for it. I mean, they pay for it in points, but they don't suffer any disadvantages for having that. They have the full oath, they have the unique units, they have the amazing characters, so they have everything. Whereas things like Dark Angels, for example, or Blood Angels, they get the cool units, but they don't get the special oath, and it feels wrong. So I think that every single non-compliant chapter should get the Black Templars treatment and just stop clinging on to oath, get your own rule, and get your own codexes with great detachments that are going to be same as Gladius. And it's going to be hard to make that, but I believe in GW, they have great rules writers that sometimes give us really amazing stuff. So that's what we need for the end of 10th and start of the 11th edition, in my opinion. They need to make Space Marines all feel unique. And they've started that process kind of already with the Black Templars, but still the best Black Templar lists are Gladius and them just going around the problem of having rerolls to hit, which is not exactly what I think GW wanted. So let's hope that they're gonna remedy that situation. But for now, here is how the Victrix Guard fight. Do they fight well? Yes, they do. Are they the best, most killy unit ever possible? No, they're not. Are they unbeatable? No, they're not. So that's my take. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.